Welcome to the human narratives. Hey, beautiful, lovey, lovies. Welcome to the human narratives. This is another episode with your one and only Dorinda. It's a pleasure to be back, of course. I hope you had a lovely and beautiful week. Mine was beautiful, filled with work, but also took some time to explore, breathe in this beautiful nature of ours, and absorb all of this beautiful creation of God's greatness. And therefore, it helps me create the sense of balance that I need on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that you're finding those things that brings balance in your life. So welcome to the human narrative. It is a pleasure always to bless you guys. Bless you guys. Not only with my beauty, but with the grace of God that He has placed in me. Okay. So today, I would like to be talking about the stereotypical perception of Black women and women of color. I am a Black woman. And, I'm also a woman who immigrated from a foreign country to be able to live in the United States and have experienced so many different things that have taught me and allowed me to be the woman that I am today. And I've also had friends who have gone through their own individual experiences that I'm going to touch on a little bit on today, right? And hopefully, how this discussion can help us to implement positive changes in our communities so that everyone is included and feel inclusive in policy, procedures, in receiving services. Because guess what? That's what it's supposed to be about. We shouldn't have to go to receiving services in places where we have rights to do so. And we're being discriminated against because of how we look or because of how you look. That should never be the case. So, welcome to the human narratives and come in and dive in with me tonight or today, wherever you are, right? So, the stereotypical perception of Black women and women of color are harmful, of course, and this perception has been generalized in or rooted in racism, sexism, and colonialism, right? And also in white supremacy. And this stereotypical perception is often portrayed in the media, it's portrayed in literature, it's also portrayed throughout history, not just in the United States. You can go overseas in different countries and you can see that perception in display. Okay. So, in social institutions, and this tends to shape how women of color are treated in society, and it tends to shape how women in color are treated general when receiving services. And I'm going to, of course, provide some examples on those things. I'm going to touch, of course, on a personal experience that a friend of mine who's no longer here also went through as a result of this stereotypical perception that we often carry. So, what are some of the stereotypes of Black women? Oh my goodness. I'm sure you all have heard the angry Black woman perception, right? Portraying that Black women are irrationally angry. Don't talk to her. Be careful. She angry. No, baby, she ain't angry. She just know how to use her voice. She's aggressive and she's combative. But you know what? I've also realized in a lot of situations, if a woman is having to carry her feminine and her masculine energy because of her experiences and the things that she had to endure, guess what? She's going to come off as very stern, firm, an individual or someone who is not going to allow anyone to cross that boundary in her life. It's not about being aggressive. It's not about being angry. And it's not about being combative. It's about ensuring that when they do walk into that office space, when they do walk into that family space, when they do walk into that social space, they're given the audacity and the respect, the utmost respect that they so deserve and that they don't need to beg for or ask for. And a lot of time this is used to silence this angry black woman perception is used to silence black women and valid experience of frustration, and it leads to some form of injustice a lot of times in our system, right? Or even the perception of the strong black woman. Despite black women being, resilient and always able to endure hardship without support, this type of perception often leads to neglect, emotional neglect, mental neglect, because there are times and instances where individuals who are often perceived as a strong black woman, that, oh, she doesn't need any help. She got it. She's always got it. But who doesn't need any help? No matter how strong, no matter how resilient, no matter how awesome a black woman will be and is, they also need someone by their side that's going to stand strong. Like I said in my previous episode, it's not about having someone by your side to parent that you didn't birth. Okay? It's about having a partner by your side that's going to stand with you, hands to hand, toes to toe, to take care of the things that we must take care of, baby. Because that's what it should be about, you know? Oh my goodness, the Jezebel spirit, the Jezebel perception, that sexualize black women and portraying them as hypersexual or seductive. And baby, yes, we do have the curves. And we do have all of those sexiness that you talk about. Whether it's slim, whether it's thin, whether it's lean, whether it's fat, whether it's delicious, whatever, baby. We can bring that to the table, okay? But this perception originates from slavery to justify the exploitation of black women bodies. A lot of these masters who owned slaves were enslaving these women, putting them through hardship and labor and all of those things. And when it came to nighttime, baby, they were in their barns, in their hunts, getting in that Jezebel. So it was not used as a form of, beauty as it should be, but to explore in so many ways, right? Or the mammy. Women in this perception black women are often perceived as loyal, nurturing, a caretaker who exists to serve just white families. And this tend to desexualize and devote it to just the perception that we should only devote ourselves to others' needs, erasing the personal desires of one's own. And that's the perception that we've been carrying on for years. And that has been passed on now to the Latinas, right? And I'm going to talk about that as well. Or the sapphire. This is similar to the angry black woman. The caricature is loud and emasculating and demeaning in so many ways. It's so funny. When I look at the stone, for example, I did a little research on this, right? I look at the stone, the gemstone of sapphire. And this type of stone, of course, is known for its deep blue color. In general, it's associated with positive qualities like wisdom, you know, truth, faithfulness, and loyalty and protection across various cultures and traditions. And it is often used in jewelry to symbolize commitment, trust, particularly in engagement rings or in whatever form that you chooses to use that stone for, right? However, when it is associated with black women, the name sapphire carries the weight of a negative stereotype that has significantly impacted the perception of black womanhood in the media, in society, and recognizing and challenging such stereotypes is important to be more for us to be able to foster more inclusivity and representation, and in other for black women experiences to not be demonized, because when it's associated to a black woman, this stone is often perceived in a negative connotation, and it shouldn't be that. I mean, this stone is beautiful. I love jewelries. If I'm being compared to something that is beautiful, why is the perception all of a sudden changes when it relates to a woman of color or a black woman? Because society only wants to show you what they want to show you in order for them, for a certain population of people, to be on top. Because all of us can be on top, right? Because that's what they say. Because not everyone can make money in that way. Whew, Lord have mercy. So, what are the stereotypes of other women of color? I talked about the Latina. A lot of time, the hot, spicy Latina is often portrayed as fiery, emotionally, sexually provocative, right? And this often reduces the passion and unpredictable characteristics that is often portrayed, not only in our society, but also sometimes in the perception that when receiving services that a lot of women of Latina, community tend to experience, or the maid, which cast Latino women in submissive, service-oriented role, especially in the media, which reinforce the classic and racist perception that a lot of times is portrayed through generations to generations. Or the illegal immigrant. Baby, we all illegal immigrant. Most of us don't even know where we came from, okay? So if you're talking about somebody being illegal, be grateful that you know that your foot or wherever you at, you can claim that destination. Because you don't even know where your people and your people and your people and your people and your people came from, because due to slavery and colonialism. So we are all immigrant in this world, but it's often perceived, especially in the Latino community, the illegal immigrants, assuming that Latinos are undocumented and they're criminals and economically dependent. I mean, for example, we've been talking about the wall. One thing I love about my Latina people, whether you build a wall or you build a tower, if they're going to be successful to climb over that wall or tower, they will. Because can nothing stop them? And nothing should. Because this world belongs to all of us. Okay? So get over get over it. All right? Um, Asian women, the submissive lotus blossom. They idolize women, Asian women, as quiet, obedient, and exotic, which reinforce the colonial fantasies and silence Asian women's real voices, right? Oh, you always have to be thin and small. You always have to, not speak when your husband is speaking or when your partner is speaking. Baby, if you have a voice and yours is not being heard, I need you to use it. Okay? Because in any spaces where you feel safe, you also should feel heard, because that's important. And it's not about being disrespectful, like I stated earlier. If you would part with your partner and that partner feels like you need to be submissive, Give me a reason to be submissive, baby, and I'll be submissive all day long. But I cannot be in my masculine energy and my feminine energy and expect me to be submissive. What are you bringing to the table for me to just stay in that feminine energy where I don't need to use my masculine energy? Hmm. All right, now let's have some real talk and real conversation. It could lead to real outcomes. The dragon woman, right? We portray, Asian women as deceitful, manipulative, or sexually dominant, which contradict the submissive stereotypical perception that was built but still sexualized and in our society. What do you want? You say one thing, but then you say another. What about the indigenous woman, often called the squaw, the racist and sexist trope depicting indigenous women as dirty, subservient, and promiscuous? How dare you describe a woman as that? How dare you? And then still lay in that bed with that woman and going that coo and expect everything to be after you're done. So we have to work on this stereotypical perception because it's not only hurting us, it's hurting generations to come. A lot of times there's a perception or talked about children are not hateful. Of course, children are not born hateful. It is what we teach them that causes them to become hateful. If a child is introduced to racism, to hate a black person, or to hate a white person, or to hate a Latina person, or to hate an Asian person, or to hate a Indian person, or an indigenous person, guess what that child is going to grow up as and becoming as if they don't themselves change that perception or perspective. They're also going to be hateful towards those group of people. So hate is taught, it is not born. For y'all who think that it's born. The noble savage, or portraying indigenous women as in tune with nature, wise, or spiritual, often this tend to dehumanize or even by reducing their identities to just folklores. Come on now. And what are the consequences of these things? Not only the impact of children and generational, you know negative perception that are carried on through history. But there are also mental health neglect and burnout, especially due to the strong black woman, perception, over policing and under protecting. Black women being, seen as less innocent or in need of always help. I work in healthcare, okay? So I'm not saying these things just to be saying these things. I've worked in communities. Ooh, girl, I got to straight my leg. I've worked in healthcare and I've worked in communities, hospitals, nonprofits, for profits, private practice, all in those different settings. And I've seen these things happen. And I'm not just talking based on book knowledge. I'm talking based on experiences that I've had to spoke on because I'm not the type of uh, person who will walk into a room to provide service and you'll tell me BS to treat somebody different and I go along with it. I don't care who you are. We're going to be treated as humans, equal and just. Okay? Okay. So all of these different perception, it leads to over policing, under protecting, sexual violence. It causes it impacts the numbers of sexual violence, and also often leading to underreported or dismissing a lot of cases. I've seen situations where people are being raped but they're not going to the police. They're not coming to the hospital. Or if they do go to the hospital for treatment, they're not revealing who their perpetrators are because of fear that of retaliation. And that should never be a case when someone have been victimized. It should never be the case. A woman should never walk into a hospital and be afraid that they've been raped or violated in any form, and be afraid to reveal that perpetrator's name or information. There are many instances, for example, individuals who are married to law enforcement who will not dare speak on, any concerns related to that because of the blue collar law. Now that's another topic for another day. And I'm not saying this that everybody in law enforcement is this way, just like everybody in society is not this way, but there are still issues in those different systems that must be addressed, and sometimes are ignored because of who we know, and that's never okay. Employment discrimination, the biases about competency, attitude, and demeanor. There are many times where I've heard people who says, I didn't put my, race on the employment card because I didn't want them to know that I'm black. Baby, I am going to put my race on that black card. Or whatever you call it. I am black. If you chooses to hire me, you just chooses to hire me. And if you don't, you just don't. Because I'm going to come into that building knowing fully who I am. And you are not going to have any opportunity to have to guess. Okay? Cultural invisibility. Many women of color feel unseen, unheard, or even misrepresented, right? Because of how our system is created. There's this perception of, like I stated earlier, the freedom of speech, or the freedom of, to be able to, protest, the freedom of whatever. But are we really free in those areas when policies and things that are supposed to protect us are not doing what it's supposed to? We are not. Definitely not. So let's talk about Black women and women of color in maternal care. Whew, this is a little sensitive for me, but I'm going to get through it. Because guess what? The information must be revealed. And that's the most important part. It's not about my sensitivity, but it's about making sure that people are aware about how society and how sometimes we show up and how that impacts us, right? For example, I expressed earlier how I've worked in different settings in healthcare. And there are times where, as a therapist, a social worker, where a doctor or someone will call me down to come provide services to, any patient, for example. But what I've learned through those environments is that a lot of times when it's a Black woman and they're young, or it's a Latina woman and they're young, they are quick to give me a call to say, "Oh, Dorinda, you better come down here. We have an issue. We might have to call CPS. Oh, the baby don't fail. We don't know what happened. Or, oh, Dorinda, you need to come down here because this child is tested for cannabis, for THC. We don't know what's going on. You may have to call CPS. Dorinda, you need to come down here because this child is here for mental health concerns, and we don't know what's going on. You need to call CPS." But one of the differences that I've also heard is when it's a white family or Caucasian family. A lot of times I don't get those calls as frequently as I should. And what I've learned to do as a therapist is I assess individual based on their circumstances and what occurred. I am not going to call CPS if I don't have to call CPS. But best believe I will call CPS if I do. Okay? Because my job is still to protect. Okay? But in instances where I feel like, a family is being discriminated against because of their color or because of their age and because of who they are, I have to go in, not just being able to listen to that provider that I see every day, that I, work with every day, but also be able to hear the patient's perception, to hear the patient's experiences of what occurred. It could be that they've done everything that they could have done, but it still led to this outcome as to why they're here. So how can I ensure that I'm still not victimizing this family because of what policy or what the human perception or stereotypical perception is. We have to be careful in how we treat people, how we service people, because it either can lead to that individual trust in that system and continue to come back for more services, or that person feeling unjust in that system and never having to come back. And that is how children stay abused and neglected. That is how families stay underserved. And there must be a difference. And there must be a change. You know. So in maternal care, it's also rooted, of course, in racism, these perceptions, the neglect of it. Oh, excuse me. It's of course, rooted in colonialism, this medical bias, right? And it's often, contributed to a lot of negative or disparities in maternal health outcomes. Ooh, excuse me, little girl burp, 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 burp. And a lot of disparities in maternal health outcome, including higher rates of, maternal mobility, mortability, and poor treatment during pregnancy and childbirth and even postpartum, which can lead to postpartum depression. These are the things that a lot of us may not experience because of our status and income or because of who we know. But when you look like me, and I know this skin look beautiful and black, baby. I love this blackness. And I thank God for it. And I thank God for it. But it does impact how other people may perceive it. And not that it matters to me, but it impacts the services that certain individuals receive because they look like me. So this strong black woman stereotype, right? That black women are naturally strong and don't feel pain like others and can endure more. I remember when my best friend, Val, was pregnant with her fifth child, and because that's what she wanted to do. And her and I were talking a week before she passed away. Actually, like the day she went to the hospital, the night she went to the hospital, we talked because I assumed that she was going to walk back out of the hospital, and she never did, of course. But prior to leading her going to the hospital to deliver, I remember her telling me, "Hey D, I'm in pain, and I've been talking to my OBGYN that I'm in pain. And every time I ask for, a notes to be off of work, she keeps telling me that you need to go to work," because her perception was, "Oh, you're lazy. You just want to be off from work. So you need to go to work and you complain too much." But what did she continue to do as a black woman that didn't want to keep pushing back and forth with the system? She kept going to work. Despite the fact that she was bleeding, despite the fact that she was in pain, and despite the fact that she was communicating these things to her doctor who was supposed to protect and create a safe space for her. That should have never been the case. And there was a reason why, even though as feisty as she was, I assumed there was a reason why she never fought back. And of course, as a listening and supportive ears, I listened and I provided that support. And I asked for her to push back. But there was a reason why she didn't. Eventually, she ended up going into the hospital and passing away. She ended up getting COVID. But her main concern was, and this was the height of COVID, of course, was that her child was being saved. And she ended up choosing her child over herself. But the reason why I share this story is because why did she have to be questioned when she stated that she was in pain? I am a professional. And when my, patient comes to me for disability leaves and I complete my evaluation and assessment, who am I to say, "Oh no, you're not in distress"? Who am I to say, "Oh no, you don't need time off"? I will provide time off for you because that may save your mental health. That may protect you from a lot of different stresses that you may be going through that you may not even be comfortable to really reveal to me in that space. And that is how we should be showing up and serving those who come to us. Not questioning them like we're the damn police at the first 38 and we're about to send people to jail because they need that support. It shouldn't be the case because we're not the police. We are servant of this world. And when God places us in certain positions, we must remember that. Okay? So what is the impact of this perception of, being black woman and strong and you can endure pain? The pain and symptoms are dismissed or they're undertreated. The concern during labor of postpartum are bleeding, pain, infection, and all of these things, like I expressed, that my best friend experienced, are ignored. There's also mental health struggle like postpartum depression and underdiagnosed or even overlooked. The hyperfertile or overbreeding trope. The belief that black and brown women are excessively fertile or have too many children and that they're irresponsible. Now, when you look across the races, you can find that in any demographic. But why is this perception only projected towards women of color? And this leads to judgment, it leads to shaming by healthcare providers. I've seen this. I remember incidents where, a mom will bring their child to serve for services for mental health. And because this mom has on a name brand clothes, and, this mom would ask, so this parent would ask for a taxi voucher or any type of services. I've seen my colleagues talking madness about this person. Oh, they have some Gucci shoes on. They have some Gucci purse on. Why are they asking for a cab service? Because they are. And because we have it. And it's not yours. It belongs to this, agency. And the purpose of it is to be able to get the families who request such services. This mom or this father is going through a hard time right now. How can we as providers show up and show out? Not just providers, but in our churches, in our communities, in our families, because all of these stereotypical perceptions are across the board. How can we show up as people, as human? Nothing human should sound foreign to any of us. Nothing human should sound foreign to any of us. Nothing. And this reduces quality of reproductive counseling and, of course, a lot of prenatal support. Why would anyone go in spaces where they don't feel protected, where they don't feel safe? I know I won't. I certainly will not. Because that's important for me to be able to open up. It fueled implicit biases about birth control and a lot of family planning activity, or the non-compliant or uneducated patient. That belief of women of color don't follow medical advice, don't understand their bodies, or are careless about health. How can you tell somebody about their body and how they should show up or shouldn't show up? That's their body. And what make you think they are not educated? If you create a dialogue or an environment where someone feels safe to be able to have that dialogue, then you will learn more. And this perception provides, where patients are not able to explain or receive options fully. It inform and their consents are not respected because it's undermined. And a lot of times this is because we're not also providing the cultural competence services that these individuals need. Let me just go in and charge. Let me just go in and talk to you for a second. Not even build a rapport or the spaces for people to feel safe. Or the drug seeking or addictive mother. Believe that Black, Indigenous, or even Latina mothers are more likely to abuse substances. And the impact is unwarranted drug testing during labor or pregnancy, involvement of child protective services, like I mentioned earlier, based on racial profiling, and this leads to emotional trauma and mistrust of healthcare institution. That shouldn't be the case. Oh my goodness, the teen mother or the welfare queen. Woo! At any point of our lives, whether it's receiving services through welfare or for somewhere else where we wouldn't have to apply to these services, we've had to receive help from someone of some place. It may not look like the welfare system, but it doesn't give us reason to judge or to create narratives just to make us feel good or to implement policies that continue to undermine these women or demographic of people. Young black and brown women are irresponsible, relying on public assistance to raise their children. This moral judgment, can come from providers. It reduces access to high quality of maternal care or assumption about, parenting capability. And there are young women out there who are hustling and doing what they're supposed to do to take care of their children without the system because of this type of perception. It degrade and leads to a lot of complex socioeconomic factors that affects healthcare in those communities and those demographics. The consequences of these type of things are huge. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy related causes in the US, even when controlling for income and education. Indigenous women also experience higher maternal mortality and morbidity rates, often in underfunded or cultural unsafe care systems. That shouldn't be the case. Latina and Asian women face unique cultural and linguistic barriers compounded by immigration related fears and stereotypes. Those are things that should not be happening. Nothing human should feel foreign to you and I because we are one. This is a notable experience. Serena Williams experienced life threatening complication after childbirth, and her symptoms were initially dismissed. This is someone with money. Whew, Lord have mercy, help us. if someone with money is being treated this way in our system, whew, imagine who don't have the money, don't have the resources, don't have the means, the power, the network, the connection. Despite her wealth, despite her fame, her story also reflects what many black women face, not being believed when reporting pain or problems. Just like my best friend. Just like my best friend. This young lady was talking to her doctor about that she was in pain. And the type of job that she had, caused her to have to stand on a daily basis for hours. And she was not a small woman, but yet she was going to her provider, and all of those things were dismissed. So it is important that we address these issues that, by providing anti-bias training for medical professionals, for our communities, even for our young children, having that type of educational talk or teachable moments. Because, like I said, children are not born racist, they are taught racist traits and racism and behavior. Cultural competence care that honors language, tradition, and autonomy. It is not about you going into those different spaces and, implementing what you think someone may need, but asking, evaluating what that patient or that client need so that they are served in the appropriate capacity that they deserve. There are times I remember at one time I was servicing a family from overseas, and I'm so I'm bubbly. I love what I do. I try to create a safe space for my patients, and I walked in and I was about to give the mother a handshake, but then realized in this culture you don't shake the mother's hands, you don't shake the man hands at all. And I had to step back, and I created a space to learn about that family and that culture before even starting my evaluation, because I did not want that to ever happen again. And I also wanted to ensure that they felt safe, they felt heard, and they felt understood, so that they know that they can come back in those different spaces to receive the services that they deserve, because that's important. I assume that I want to be treated in those different spaces the same way. Because, baby, if you don't, you will know. But not everybody knows about their rights. And we have to be able to teach that so that they know. That is important. Advocate for burden persons or birth rights. Policy reform targeting systematic racism in healthcare. Black maternal health, to be able to ensure that not just black women, but women of color are, treated with equality in so many different platforms that they go to receive different services. Oh my goodness. Of course, I want to talk a little bit too about dating. I'm a love lady. I love, love, love. But what is also the stereotype of black women and women of color when dating? Let's talk about that. Mm-mm-mm. Ooh, this angry black woman perception is carried throughout all of these different topics, right? The belief that black women are combative, argumentative, or difficult to date, and this often leads to labels or as being too much or intimidating. It leads to emotional distancing or outright rejection in dating spaces, or even the perception of the strong black woman. Yes, I'm a strong black woman. Yes, I can hold my own. But believe it, if there is a man next to me that can hold his own and hold us, I don't need to be in my masculine energy. But I do need to feel protected in that space. And guess what? We can also create that protection for you, boo. But it can be a one-way street. It creates this pressure for suppress to be able to suppress this vulnerability, and to also create a space to learn about one another, and expecting us to be able to provide that support. Or even the Jezebel spirit believe that black women are hypersexual, wild, and exist for sexual gratification. That's not our purpose. That's not only our purpose, because I'm telling you, there's some women who are about their business, and at the end of the day, yes, they're about to die. But it also have to feel right, and they also have to feel safe, and they also have to feel protected. Okay. And this view is often perceived as good for sex, but not wife material. But yet you dipping, but you're saying that not wife material. But you keep coming back to deep, to let you know there's more in that space and quality in that space that we're not intentionally trying to see. Or this undesirable or less feminine. The Western belief standard that black women are often seen as less desirable or too masculine. Data for dating apps such, black women as, few, they tend to receive few messages or even matches because of this perception, which are excluded from the mainstream narratives of romance and even being desirable. Latina woman, you know, this assumed to be jealous, irrational in relationships, or even this submissive caregiver. They're expected to just traditional, hold on to these traditional roles without, reciprocity, and only known or perceived to just deliver and give birth, and they are not respected or seen equally. That shouldn't be the case. Or even our Asian women, you know, Asian women are sometimes dehumanized as trophies or status symbols, which reduces their ethnicity instead of being seen as full individuals. We have work to do. Or what about indigenous women? Viewed as wild but not respected to modern complex individuals, right? These individual invisible stereotype, or the Pocahontas fantasy that indigenous women are natural, spiritual, and sexually available, and this idea that they're not individuals but just this sexual being. The real world impact is that women of color often experience sexual objectification instead of authentic emotional interest. Colorism and Eurocentric standards, these type of things, focuses on lighter skinned women of color are often treated differently or deemed more attractive, fueling this internalized bias. I remember when I first came to the United States in the 90s, and a lot of times I could hear people say, oh, 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 you too masculine. You got too much muscle in your legs, baby. Now everybody's trying to do surgeries to get a little extra muscle on their legs. I thank God for my muscles, and I thank God for this beautiful skin, and I'm not changing it for nobody. But that's the perception, even as a child, that I had to experience, you know. Or you African Buddhist scratcher, go back to your country. All of those type of things. Because I am a masculine individual. And I love that. And that will never change. So this data bias study, of course, it's really important that we focus on all of these things. Women of color may feel forced for constantly proving that they're not like the stereotypes that is often described. What needs to change? Self-awareness and accountability, dating preferences, media representation that shows diverse women of color as full, complex being. There needs to be open conversation that we're having right now here at the Human Narratives about internalized racism, colonialism, and cultural biases in the dating system in our communities, how we're raising our children in our different agencies and services that are being provided to different families, and how those services are being received, not how we assume it's being received, but are we really talking and understanding the perception of these individuals? All of those things are important. If we're not the change in today's world, if we're not the change in past, in the past, then our future would not be the change. Our children will not be the change. Our communities will not be the change. Our churches will not be the change. Our school and educational systems will not be the change. Our political leaders will not be the same change. Our political policies will not be the change. Our laws will not be the change. What are we doing today to implement the change that all individual need, where they can be seen as an individual, not just as a collective of group of people? And that can still happen. But is that happening in a way where we're not attaching these stereotypical perceptions that have lasting and negative effect? As always, this is your host. This is your girl, the one and only. Be the change that we need in this world, Dorinda. It is a pleasure to be here. It is a pleasure to be able to share this perspective with you. And I hope that each day when you wake up, you are the change that we need. God bless. Always have a lovely week. Much love, my lovey, lovey, lovies.